On this edition of Independent Sources, American Influence, a recent general election in Haiti renews concerns that the U.S. State Department may still carry too much influence on the country. And #SheWillBe, the city's effort to help young women battle the systematic inequality they continue to face. Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Abi Ishola. Millions of Haitians went to the polls over the weekend to vote in the presidential and parliamentary elections. The process was largely peaceful, with a few cases of fraud accusations. The results won't be known until next month, a way to diffuse tension and damp down the potential for violent protests. Pierre-Pierre spoke to us from Haiti via Skype about the campaign, the vote, and the U.S.'s role in these and past elections in that politically troubled Caribbean country. Hi, Gary. How are you?
Hi, Abby. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So let us know what happened during the elections in Haiti. Who won?
The vote started kind of late. It was about 4 hours late, and there were some tensions with voters who had been there at the polling stations at 6, hoping to cast a ballot. But once the polls opened, I think things went fairly well. It's too early to tell who won because in Haiti, the vote is usually the calm. The result is when the storm occurred.
Oh, wow.
A lot of candidates always challenge the results, and sometimes they put out their supporters on the streets to show violence and really try to push the vote in their favor. So, but what the Electoral College has done this time is they will not announce the results until a couple of weeks from now. Hopefully by then, all nerves would have calmed down. People would have gotten a better idea about what really happened and what really didn't happen. And all the conspiracy theories would have been cast aside, and people would be more likely to accept the result of the vote that the government has published.
Well, you mentioned violence. We heard that there was some violence around this vote. How did things pan out in that aspect?
Well, there's a lot of ways that we can describe violence. In the context of Haiti, a lot of these things were skirmishes, frankly, more than actual violence. What has happened is in 1987, the first sort of like Haiti's experiment with this democratic process, this voting, there was massive violence where several people died, including some journalists. Oh, wow. And so it has become almost a cliche. Every Haiti vote is sort of like, is violence going to happen? What's going to happen? So anytime there's a little, skirmish, like I said earlier, in the vote, tensions were flaring. So if there was some pushing and shoving and the police had to intervene, so violence. So, I mean, it's all contextual.
Yeah. So why were these elections so important, and what's at stake?
Well, they're incredibly important because at stake is the continuation of the rebuilding of Haiti after the earthquake. There are billions of foreign aid, a lot of which hasn't been dispersed to the economy, and you kind of need continuity with the platform. And so there's a lot of jockeying. Who's going to, is the next president going to continue the work that this current president has been undergoing? And if so, what happens? And there are a lot of people who believe that Michel Martelly, the current government's sort of like platform of developing tourism, is misguided. And there are a lot of candidates who think that developing the agricultural sector is more important because it's also a way to basically make Haiti less dependent of foreign goods. Right now, about 80% of Haiti's agricultural stuff is imported either from the Dominican Republic, the neighboring country, or from the United States, largely Miami. And so there are talks that these investments should be made more in agriculture as opposed to building pretty resorts that will only benefit the owners of the resorts and not really create meaningful jobs.
So if we back up a little bit, how did the campaigning go? We know it's different in Haiti than it is here in the United States.
Well, Haitians, we're very colorful people. If you think of Haiti, the place in America that closely resembles Haiti is New Orleans, where everything's a party. Whether there's a funeral, whether it's a party. And so political campaigning was nothing but a party in many instances, although there are times it can get violent. But, Friday was the last official day of campaigning. So throughout last week, you had trucks with speakers blasting songs and ditties that were recorded for these candidates. And so you had hundreds, if not thousands of people following these trucks.
Wow.
The city became a virtual parking lot. It took me 3 hours to go from the Electoral College office where I had to get my press credentials.
3 hours?
Which is roughly about 2 miles. It took me 3 hours. And that was pissed because the last day of campaigning, all the candidates were really out there pounding the pavement, literally. And another aspect of Haitian politics is that there's always some kind of catchy phrase, where people have a lot of logo symbolism. So when the voters go to the polls, that they remember the symbols more than anything else. You have to understand this is a country of about 70 to 80% illiteracy rate. And so a lot of the way you capture people's imagination, it's not just necessarily with your platform, what you're going to do for the country, but how catchy is your slogan? How is it connecting with the average voter? And so that when they go to the polls, they'll know exactly. For instance, back in '91, Aristide, who's now in Haiti, former president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, his logo was a rooster. And a rooster is a real virile type of symbol, very machismo. And so people remember to vote for the rooster. And it also is a double entendre here. It's also a cock. So it's, whatever way you want to define that symbol. But anyway, it was very catchy. And now you have similar things happening. One of the candidates who's very popular, he was a banana exporter. So the word for him, it was neg banan, the banana guy. So everybody remember that. So when you go to the vote, you remember that's his logo, and people vote for that way.
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, in the past, there have been talks that the U.S. has actually negotiated winners for different elections in Haiti. Was that the case this time around?
Well, it's too early to tell. But that was the case in 2011 when Martelly became president, was selected as president. What happened is sometimes the U.S., and it's unfortunate because, we are the bastion of democracy. We want every country in the Western Hemisphere to be democracy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Noble cause. But more often than not in Haiti, if the U.S. does not like the result, it tries to orchestrate the winner of a candidate that more aligned with U.S. interests, someone they can easily manipulate, someone who's a puppeteer. And that's what you had in the case of Martelly. And, this is not sort of my conspiracy theory. This is something that's been reported. There's been a lot of emails during this sort of like State Department email crisis. A lot of things that came out was a communication between Cheryl Mills, who was Hillary Clinton's chief of staff, and other players and their role in selecting Martelly.
And how have the people of Haiti react to that kind of thing?
They've been very cynical. It's interesting because in past elections, people in the street will say, well, this election is rigged. And I'm always like, why are we so conspiracy-minded? And then, 5 years later, 4 years later, you learn that they were not conspiracy. After all, there was the truth that the State Department did manipulate the results. And so there's been a lot of apathy. People don't want to vote. I mean, some people vote. Of course, it's about 3 million registered voters, so you can have turnout. But you speak to a lot of middle-class people, a lot of rich people. They're totally disconnected. They really don't think that their vote counts, because at the end of the day, it is the wishes of the international community, as has been the case last election and in the past. But to a certain extent, under Aristide, he was able to mobilize people in the streets to fight against any sort of like manipulative I suppose the State Department hasn't been too happy about that, and one of the reasons why he was overthrown twice in Haiti.
So you spoke to people who don't want to vote anymore.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of people, men on the street, or even colleagues of mine here, contacts, friends, they don't vote. They really don't. They don't see the purpose of it. A lot of disenfranchised people do vote if they feel that a candidate will have the best interest in mind, a candidate that they can. But at the end of the day, a lot of people feel that these candidates are out for themselves. They're just there to get the perks of power, the spoil of power, and there's a lot of it in a country as poor as Haiti. And for instance, a senator or a congressperson receives, free car, gas voucher, and it's a cushy lifestyle, and they go there for that, not necessarily to fight for Haiti, to get better international deals for Haiti. And so people are not really that enthusiastic about the voting process, although, again, like we said earlier, it's very important and people do vote. But unfortunately, a lot of the people who are voting are easily manipulated. There's talk about buying the vote, where candidates will go out and pass out cash to get out the vote. And people sometimes will take money from the well-financed candidate and vote for somebody else. So it's really a free-for-all kind of way. One of the things I want to underline this time is that one of the candidates who's the leading candidates, Jude Celestin, he was actually the winner last elections, but it's one of those things that the State Department orchestrated, and they felt that Martelly was someone they could do business with. And Celestin was maybe not willing to do business the way the State Department, the U.S. government in general want to manipulate things in Haiti. And I think the question is, why does the State Department want to manipulate things in Haiti? I think there's a lot of exasperation about Haiti's unwillingness to be controlled. And so they've been looking for a candidate, and they found one in Martelly. Because when you look at the last 4 years, there's never anything that the State Department, the U.S. government wanted that they didn't get. Martelly was musicians. One of the baddest, bad Haitians, bad boy. Is very colorful personality and knew nothing about politics. And he was someone they could work with, they could do business with.
Non-presidential material, basically.
No, not at all. Okay. He spent his 4 years very docile. Everything that the U.S. government wanted, they got. And so now we'll see what happens. We'll find out in a week or so the result. But ultimately, I think there's going to be a runoff because you had 54 presidential candidates, for a voter roll of 3 million people. That's excessive. And so there's no way that anyone will be able to get the 50% of the vote to outright win the first round of elections. So most likely, and all likely, there'll be a runoff in December, and that's when a winner will be declared, hopefully to legitimate vote that the people's choice will be respected and not be negotiated through the U.S. Department or the UN or any other international body that has influence in Haiti.
Okay, Gary, I'm sorry we have to wrap you there. Thank you so much for briefing us with what's going on in Haiti right now with the elections.
Thank you, Abby. See you next week.
Thank you. Be safe.
Always.
Still to come on the show, the city's effort to invest more in young women of color. Before that, Crystal Lowe has some other news.
Thanks, Abby. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Voices of New York reports on a community-engaged oral history project called My Barrio, My Borough. The program, commissioned by the Laundromat Project, has been training Filipino community members to conduct video-recorded interviews with other Filipinos about their experiences and memories of growing up in Queens. Organizer Claro de los Reyes says Queens has a very significant place in Filipino-American identity and nationality. He noticed that there is not as much archival material readily available about the Filipino experience in New York compared to the West Coast. A public event is scheduled for early December to showcase 10 to 15 of these recordings, as well as art inspired by the newly archived material. From Sing Tao Daily, Street Vendor Project, a membership-based organization with nearly 2,000 vendor applicants, is working to train, support, and raise public awareness about vendors and their enormous contribution to New York City's economy. This comes at a time when the city's rigid permit cap for street vendors is putting undue pressure on the sector. According to a newly released report by the Institute for Justice, street vendors contribute nearly $300 million a year to the city's economy, but the permit cap has largely suppressed the industry. The cap has put countless would-be vendors out of business and has forced others to operate illegally. Leases on the black market have made it nearly impossible for some vendors to stay in business. Vendors would rather pay a high application fee to the city than to continue to rip permits on the black market. Applicants on the waiting list now have to wait 15 to 20 years before their application is approved. The Writing on the Walls Art District is a series of 12 murals in Brownsville, Brooklyn, created as a means of staking a visual claim on the neighborhood that is becoming increasingly gentrified. N. Carlos J., an artist with roots in the neighborhood, gathered a group of internationally renowned and emerging street artists to complete murals that are sponsored through crowdfunding. Jay hopes the murals will help Brownsville residents foster a sense of ownership through creative expression. Jay hopes to raise $10,000 through a GoFundMe campaign to cover the cost of creating 10 additional murals for the community. That's from BrooklynBase.com. And finally, Voices of New York reports on an exhibition titled Japanese Koge, Future Forward, which showcases the work of 12 established and emergent Koge artists. Koge craft requires highly artistic skills rooted in centuries of Japan's cultural history. The exhibit examines the changing role of this discipline within Japanese contemporary culture. Pieces will be on display at the Museum of Arts and Design from now through February 7, 2016. Those are just a few headlines from the city's ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be right back.
Thanks for staying tuned. The New York City Council is on the verge of launching a pilot program to address the systematic inequality that plagues young women in the city. The Young Women's Initiative was created to address the growing calls for more resources to be allocated to women, just as they are being brought to bear for young men of color. I spoke with the YMI's co-chair, Joanne Smith, and Sidra Sebastian, the co-chair of the initiative's Education Committee, about what they hope to accomplish with this program. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, Joanne, I'll start with you. How did the idea for the Young Women's Initiative come about?
Sure. The Young Women's Initiative came about through community, really demanding that the issues of girls and women of color be addressed, that we as a community be able to effectively look at how are the health conditions, educational conditions, economic conditions, safety conditions, and self-sufficiency conditions of young cis and transgender women of color in New York City being supported. What are the resources that we need to invest? What are the policies we need to shift? And how is it that community in New York should work together to do this? And so we asked Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito if she would lead this charge, and she said yes.
Wow.
And she has.
So how crucial is it to have this kind of program for young women?
It's critical. This is a revolutionary program. I mean, this is a community partnership with the City of New York, the first in the nation, first Young Women's Initiative in the nation. I mean, we know even now, through Domestic Violence Awareness Month, the rates in which girls of color are killed, all women are killed, right, every 19 hours nationally, right? And we know that young women of color in school face educational challenges from being pushed out, from zero tolerance policies, from implicit bias, and within criminalization, that this is the highest rate population going to prison and being incarcerated, and it's starting in school. And so it's critical that right now, especially as the nation is looking at racial justice, that girls and women of color are a center within that racial justice, I guess, revolution and within that racial justice movement.
Yeah. Well, I know you touched on this briefly, but what kinds of issues are you looking to tackle with this program specifically?
So we're really looking to see these young people as whole people, so all the different issues that intersect their lives. So we're looking at education, we're looking at health, we're looking at what it means for them to have sustainable life, we're looking at issues around safety and criminality, so really taking a look at how the city plays a role in impacting the experiences that these young people have and what we need to do responsibly as a city to make sure that it's a space that honors them, that elevates their voices, and really makes an effort to put the money and the programming in place to make sure they have healthy lives.
And what age range are you looking to target?
We're looking at young girls to 24 years old, so really looking at the breadth of experience of a girl to young women in the city.
Okay. Do young men of color fall into this at all?
Well, New York City was the place where the Young Men's Initiative launched. I mean, Cedra's organization, the Brotherhood Sister Soul, had a role in supporting the Young Men's Initiative. And so now it's actually complementing that and saying holistically as communities, we're going to look at all our young people. We're going to look at our girls. We're going to look at our trans youth, our gender nonconforming youth, and we're going to include them in being able to tackle the issues that our young people of color are facing in New York City. And so right now, the Young Women's Initiative will focus on that so we can catch up and move together.
Okay, and I know a part of the program is recommending certain things that the city should do for young women. What are some of the recommendations that you're posing?
Well, right now we're at the process of pulling together folks from different places in the community. So the experts, young people, have a role. There are about 25 girls and young women who are part of the initiative, who are taking a leadership role in how things are moving forward. There are educators, there are people who have done policy work previously, there are physicians, there are parents. So there are people who are coming from different facets in these different areas and saying, through our experiences, through the data that we've seen, through these experiences that the young people are sharing with us directly, this is what we're going to work towards to recommendations.
Wow. So how have you guys been able to rally these people together to do this? I know you have a lot of city council members involved as well.
Yeah, there are over 200 people involved. Wow. With city council alone, there are 60 staffers who are involved, as well as the administration is involved. Maya Wiley and Lillian are honorary co-chairs and part of the initiative, as well as Anna Olivier, New York Women's Foundation, Danielle Moss of the YWCA of New York City. And so it was relatively easy to rally because so many people are, and especially women of color, like this is a women of color-led initiative also, and so many of us have been doing the work for so long in New York City. So it was a matter of tapping into the women that we knew would be doing the work, whether we named a Young Women's Initiative or not, who have been doing the work, and the young people we know who are going to grow up doing the work, right? So they're getting a chance within community, intergenerationally, to be able to sit next to a Cedra Sebastian of Brotherhood Sister Soul, who's been leading the charge there for the last 15 years, right? And have this mentor at age 15 planning this Young Women's Initiative and planning the issues, planning the, I guess, recommendations that will support young women and girls of color for years to come. And so that was a pretty easy charge.
That's the easy part.
That's the easy part.
So what's the difficult part?
I think the difficult part is the work that is at hand, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about young women and girls of color in New York City, looking at cisgender, looking at trans folk, looking at gender nonconforming, specifically who are in lower income households, there's a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of the stories statistically that are not being told accurately or not being told at all. So some of the charge is to find that information that we know is there from our own experiences as former girls and the experiences of the young experts who are on the initiative as well, but also the data that exists. So identifying what are some of the gaps and filling those gaps, and also really taking the lead from the young people to say, we hear you on these are the needs. We hear you on your recommendations. We hear you on how you see us moving forward with this initiative, and leaning on that as well. And to Joanne's point, 200 people coming together, you know, it's a management challenge as well, and one that I think the three co-chairs are doing an amazing job of, along with the speaker, to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's meaningful and timely to really address this issue.
Okay, and earlier you mentioned that the young girls will be a part of it too. What exactly will they be doing?
So they are all ready to work. So they are part of all of the committees. There's a group of them that meet weekly, and then they also are part of the different subcommittees. So they're young people who are talking to us about their experiences in public education, talking about their experiences with health, talking about their interactions with the police, both in their community, but also policing in their schools. So in all of the different subcommittees, there are young people who are talking about their experiences, who are teaching us, and who are also taking information and growing through the process as well.
Okay. So how can people in the community get involved? Like if I wanted to get involved, how do I do that?
Yeah.
So glad you asked. You can go to the She Will Be NYC website, and there you can sign up. You can ask for more information, depending on what it is you want to do as either an organization or someone in the community. Much of what we talk about and much of what the young people bring to us is reimagining, right? Getting rid of the old formula and reimagining in this new time, especially for young people. What does healthiness, what does safety, what does education really feel like and look like, and let's build that.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you so much, ladies, for being on the show.
Thank you for having us, Abby.
Thank you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Finally from us, Nigerian pride was on full display over the weekend as green and white flags were paraded down 2nd Avenue between 54th to 44th Street in Manhattan. The young and old celebrated the 55th independence anniversary of Africa's most populous nation. The event has been held in the city since 1991. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.